Hi everyone, this is Joel, founder of Easy PropTax LLC, and today we're going to talk about fighting your protest case in person. So, as a disclaimer, I'm not a licensed assessor or agent. I cannot and will not represent you in your protest, and my software does not do so either. It strictly helps you prepare a good case with fundamentals and also helps you save a significant amount of time preparing the case. But as I said, doesn't it does not is not submitted for you automatically. You have to do that yourself, and it's does not represent you. It's just something it's a tool to help you do things better. So on to the presentation. So the keys to winning your case in person. First off, go in person. That should be obvious. Be prepared and do things at the right time in the right order. So what does that actually mean? So first off, let's talk about why you should go in person. First off, you want to counter the county in person. So they have the assessor there all day with the same 3 board members, and they're just sitting there, and they, probably over the course of 15, 20 cases, they'll get to know the assessor. And so when you're coming into the situation, you're a new person. And if you're coming in just as a voice on the phone, probably not as good as being an actual physical person on par with the assessor, especially since most people are not going in person. You get a bit more advantage and a little more credit with the board just for thinking that, oh, this is important enough to be in person, because after all, the assessor's there in person because they think it's important. So and a bunch of agents I've seen also go in person because they think it's important to be there, so that there's a actual human being that the board can see. So that's why it's always better to go in person. Then you avoid technical difficulties, and there's less stress. So last year I had done a protest remote, and it was a problem in the sense that I was waiting 15 minutes or more. Actually, it was more like half an hour or so, and I was wondering the entire time, or am I going to get disconnected? Are there going to be any issues? There weren't any issues, but I could have been disconnected, and that could have led to me missing the hearing, so to speak. So it's just less stress to actually just go in person, because once you're there, they can't say you're not there or that there's a technical difficulty and then skip you. So like they could do that potentially if you're on the phone, and so you just show up in person, right? It's a lot easier. Sorry about that. So show up early. Show up about an hour before, because very often they'll be able to process your case and get you with the board very quickly, so you can actually be out before your scheduled time. The scheduled time is not set in stone. If you show up early, you can get it done and get out the door. So sometimes anyway. So at a very minimum, it'll help you get used to the environment, and then you can also talk to other people in the waiting room, and so it's better all around. And in general, you do all this stuff just so you can get an even playing field, or a more even playing field, because they have the home field advantage. The county does. So, how do you be prepared? Make sure you time yourself in your presentation. Remember, the entire hearing is supposed to be about 15 minutes, half for you, half for the assessor, which means that essentially your initial statement is probably going to be 3 minutes or so, and then the rebuttal and then the conclusion are going to take up the rest of your time. So you want to be able to spend, basically give everything, your entire case in about 3 minutes or so. And so dress decently and have color copies for everyone and the right number. So make sure you have as many as necessary for your county. In my county, the right number is the board members all need one plus one for the assessor, so 4. So that's 4 color copies. And I say color because this is an area you don't want to cheap out. Like, images are extremely important. Like, I won my case based, like, when the assessor straight up said it. It says, like, Joel has pictures, has images, and the county doesn't. And that was, as far as all 3 members were concerned, that was pretty much it. So if that's the case, then I mean, and they said it straight out, that was the case, then you want the color copies, because the better the images and the more clear they are, the easier it is to see the difference. So make things as easy as possible for yourself. I mean, I actually went so far as to, and then you can do it cheaply, right? You don't want to be doing this FedEx Kinko's the night before, because you're going to pay 160. Do it yourself, or find somebody with a color printer, or a printer that has toner that you can run off 4 copies for like $40, in toner. It's a lot cheaper if you get everything prepared way beforehand. And know the procedure. Read the pamphlet they give you about what the procedures are, and follow them. Right? Just make sure you know that stuff backwards and forwards so you understand what's supposed to happen, and then address the board, maintain decorum. So one of the rules in the pamphlet is you're supposed to address everything to the board so that you and the assessor don't get into it. And I actually was able to kind of flip this situation because I actually got the assessor mad at me by saying something like, oh, like, there's 2 types of comparables that the county is using. Half of them, or like one type are the remodels, where they're picking houses that have been remodeled and then sold, and obviously new houses are not comparable to old houses that way. For example, one house was 85% gutted in the fire in 2007 and rebuilt in 2008, and they were saying the house was built in 1980. Yes, technically it was built in 1980, but it's also rebuilt after the fire, so it's not really an old house. It's actually a new house, but that wasn't captured in the county documents. And like the other part of it, getting back to what I was saying about decorum, was the weaponization of the elderly, which is where the assessor took offense. I basically said like what the county is actually doing in effect. I'm not saying that the assessor was doing it, but in effect, they are finding houses that went up. Let's say they increased the valuation 400% or something like that over a few years, over 3 years, and so the value, let's say it was 100,000, now it's 400,000, and then they say, oh well, if that house is 400,000 because no one challenged it or somebody lost, the homeowner lost on that, then all the other houses in the area are also worth 400,000. And that's just not how it works, because essentially you can make up any number, and as long as you can get the number to stick, then now you've got evidence to use against everybody else. And the despicable part of this is that essentially the people that are not challenging are the people who are, let's say, 60 to 90 years old. And so then the assessor's like, oh well, we don't do that. Well, and he broke the rule. He addressed me directly in my statement. What he should have done is he should have waited until his statement and then talked to the board. You don't want to do that. You want to maintain decorum. He actually had to get reprimanded by the board, so I think it's one of the first times the board had to reprimand the assessor for not being professional. You want to be as professional as possible and then just present the facts as you see it. So the next question, the very first one you'll get is, as soon as you walk in the door in the waiting room, you'll have a very helpful county person. They'll ask you, how many people do you want on your panel? You can have 1 or you can have 3. And they keep saying the 1 first, right? I think it's a psychological trick to try to get you to say 1. It's good for them and it's not good for you. They say, oh, you have a choice, but the way that they kind of phrase it when you don't know what you should be going for, always pick 3. 3, because you don't want to, as the person next to me who was apparently an agent or assessor had said, you don't want to leave it up to the emperor. Like, you don't want somebody thinking that they're king. You want a group of people making a decision, because they also are able to say things like, if somebody missed out a certain section that you said, then the other 2 might pick it up, and they'll be able to present your case better as a whole for you, especially assuming you have a good case. So you always want 3 so that you can get the maximum benefit. On average, it's going to work out better for you, like most of the time. Like I would say it's probably pretty rare that you're going to have a bad situation or because you picked 3, whereas you would have had a good situation because you had 1 person. It's possible, but on average, you're going to do better with 3 people. So always pick 3. Then here's a very important question. Do you want to present your evidence first or second? The board will ask you. Always go second. Let the county waste their introduction and statement by helping you, because they're introduced, like, they have to talk about the property. They'll say something like, oh, this is in reference to property number 1123, which PID 1123, which is a 1,100 square foot house built in 1970 on a quarter-acre lot. And these are the best possible comparables that the county has picked out in market area TW83. So, like, when they say all that stuff, they're basically giving you an introduction to the property and helping you out almost, but they're trying to present their case. So if you let them go first, you can piggyback off of their introduction, and that saves you time and allows you to basically poke holes in what they're saying. If you let them go second, after you've done the introduction to the property, now first off, you have to spend time talking about the property that has never been talked about up until this point. And so you're wasting time on that. And you're also giving the assessor something to counter because of what you said. Like there's something that if you say anything, he can counter. Instead of you want him to not be able to counter your stuff. So let him talk first, and then you counter his stuff because you already know what he's going to say. He's just going to go off of, he's just going to wing it and go off of, whatever was there on the property card and just say that stuff. So there's nothing new that he can say. There's really not a whole lot you can say that's incrementally new, but the how you present it does make a huge difference, and you don't want to give them an opportunity to essentially backtalk right away. So just go second and save yourself all the hassle. So then that gets into the last question that you'll have for yourself. When do you want to give your evidence? You want to give it as late as you possibly can, but still be reasonable. So at the very beginning of the protest process, in the first month or so, right after you get your notice, I would say you want to get your documentation that, I'm going to protest right away. That's as early as possible. But once you've submitted, just submit like the bare minimum of evidence that you can to get you to the informal hearing. Do your informal hearing as early as you can. Where it's just you and the assessor on the phone, and then basically don't expect that you're gonna win, because the assessor on the informal hearings, it doesn't matter how wrong they are, they will never admit it, and then they'll just be like, oh, y'all, we're gonna the county still is going to rest on its case and stay where we're at. And it doesn't matter how good your case is, they're not going to admit it. The only case where they're going to admit that, maybe we're a little high and we'll come down, is if you have a documented sale or purchase in that year. So in other words, if you bought your property for 100,000 in a current year, and you show that, hey, this is the sale amount, and I've got the documentation for it. That's the only case where they'll say, okay, you know what, since you got the documentation, we're just going to honor that, and we're going to mark it down to that level. That is the only time that they will do that. Otherwise, they will never come down. Like it seems to be their procedure to basically just deny. So you don't get anything by trying to solve everything in the informal hearing. No one ever wins in the informal hearing because they don't have to give in, so they're not going to. So that's why you want to hold on to the bulk of the evidence. So basically, you give a skeleton outline of what you're going to talk about in your protest, the initial documentation, and then right after that, then you give them basically, like, when you get closer to the formal hearing, after you've done your informal hearing, then you want to start dumping information. So you want it at least the week before the formal hearing. That's the latest. That's when you want to actually upload your evidence in the portal, if there's a portal possible. Depending on your county, like you're going to want to modify this to basically give your evidence as probably a week before the absolute deadline of turning in evidence, all evidence. But there's other counties, like you may want to, you could even bring your evidence on the day of, and as long as you have copies for everybody, they don't care. So it really depends on your county rules and regulations, so make sure you know those and understand exactly when you can give your evidence. You want to have it all prepared and then submit at the last second, or rather, you want to submit it online a week before you need to, and then the physical document, you don't want to hand that in until you have to. So in other words, when you bring in 4 copies to the board hearing, so 3 for the board and then 1 for the assessor, you want to be very strategic about when you actually hand those over, because remember, the odds are good the assessor will never have seen this stuff. He's just winging it. And so, like, your case number, let's say 10 out of 25 for the day, he's not looking at it stuff. He's not like preparing, frantically to shoot down your evidence. He's just winging it. And so you want to make sure that when you hand the evidence, first off, remember we said that you are going second. So the second that he's about to start his introduction, that's when you want to give your copies out, because it's right before the hearing has begun, so to speak. And it's right like at the time frame where he has just enough time to flip through your evidence and realize he's screwed, but he still is going to have to go through his introduction because he doesn't have time to actually read your evidence at that point, because this is probably the first time he's actually looked at it seriously. So at that point in time, like, you're basically using that to psych him out. You're basically like saying, hey, here's all the documentation you need to refute, and oh, by the way, you can feel free to start right now. And you kind of increase the pressure on him, and at the same time, there's nothing he can actually do about it because he's going to give the introduction he was already going to give. And that's also winging it, and he can't read through your statement and refute it because he's never even seen it for the first time until now. So that's basically when you give your evidence, and yeah, that's give it as late as possible. So that's pretty much it for today, and please feel free to leave a like and comments. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Hope this was helpful.